Hello and welcome to another episode of Latitude. As part of New Delhi's balancing act in West Asia, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Tehran comes at a time when India has increased its engagement with the Gulf countries, as Iran remains a major source of energy to India.
India and Iran have shared a cultural relationship for centuries, but a formal diplomatic relationship was established only in the year 1950. However, for 4 decades thereafter, both countries were aligned with opposite sides during the Cold War years. And until recently, Iran had faced isolation and sanctions for decades following its diplomatic standoff with the US and the West. That, however, did not stop India from importing oil from Iran, and today Iran is the second largest oil exporter to India. On its part, India is now the largest foreign investor in Iran's oil and gas industry, and India also exports diesel to Iran. But despite this, India's energy relationship with Iran has not been without fissures, with doubts always lingering about Iran's reliability and stability as a supplier. Iran is known to have renegotiated deals, giving better terms to Chinese companies in the past. But apart from Iran's huge oil reserves and the energy relationship, India also recognizes the many strategic benefits that Iran provides with its location. Iran shares a border with Pakistan, Afghanistan and Central Asia on one side, Iraq and Turkey on the other side, and is located atop the Arabian Sea and the Persian Gulf region and the crucial sea lanes of communication through the Strait of Hormuz. This has led Delhi to invest heavily in the Chabahar port to gain access to Afghanistan and Central Asia and to counter the Chinese naval presence in Pakistan at Gwadar. However, as Iran hopes to emerge as a regional powerhouse, it will require some deft diplomatic handling by New Delhi, with West Asia facing a sectarian Shia-Sunni divide. Prime Minister Modi's visit to Tehran is being seen as a landmark in West Asian diplomacy. And his meeting with Ayatollah Khomeini will be closely watched, especially by Israel, Pakistan and the United States.
And to look at the number of issues, particularly in the energy sector, and equally importantly, the deft diplomacy that New Delhi has to continue to engage in when dealing with Iran and the Gulf countries, we have two experts who know the region, have considerable exposure to various aspects of Iran and Indian diplomacy. We have Mr. Narendra Taneja, who is currently the national convener of the energy cell of the BJP and also a national spokesperson of the ruling party, and a man who is regarded by many as among the world's top energy experts. And we have Ambassador KP Fabian, who has served earlier in Iran at a very crucial time in its history, and equally importantly, for the forthcoming visit of the Prime Minister to Qatar, he has also been our ambassador to Qatar. Mr. Taneja, sir, India remains heavily dependent in some ways on Iranian oil, but India also remains a huge investor, perhaps the biggest investor in Iran's energy sector. And Iran's begun to pump out considerable amount of oil after the sanctions were lifted. But even then, world oil prices have gone up and not gone down. So first, the big picture about the energy scenario vis-a-vis India's interest in the Gulf countries, and where does Iran fit into that?
Well, the whole of West Asia is important for us because our dependence on imported oil is not going to go down anytime soon. In fact, it's going to go up from 80% to 92% in coming years. And even for natural gas, and our economy, India's economy is not moving to the natural gas economy. From coal and other sources, we are moving more to the natural gas because we have signed the Paris Accord now on climate change. We have no option but to invest more in natural gas. When you're looking for more oil, affordable oil, reliable supply of oil, and at the same time, we are moving into the new age, or that's called the natural gas economy. Iran fits in very well into the scheme of things for us. It's very close to us. We have enjoyed great relations with Iran for centuries now, and at the same time, we know Iran very well. India is one of the very few countries in the world which actually set up a whole refinery customized for Iranian crude. There's Mangalore refinery on the west coast of India. So that kind of relation. We even set up a dedicated shipping line to bring Iranian oil to India, in those days called Irano-Hind, which had to be shut down following the sanctions. So picture is changing now. The sanctions are slowly melting away, and India is now building even deeper relationship with Iran. And by the way, it's very important to understand our relationship with Iran, whether energy or strategic, is independent of our relationship with other countries in that region, particularly Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, that's a very important point. Ambassador, sir, India has to do a deft balancing act, because quite clearly, until recently, because of the sanctions on Iran, it was seen by many in Iran that India was not moving as aggressively in Iran's favor, and the equal criticism from India came in about how Iran was responding to some of India's moves, particularly when it came to negotiating deals over oil and energy. And couple this with the fact that India sees Iran as a huge strategic partner outside of oil, its location in the region, its ability to dominate the sea lines of communication and the Gulf shipping, and its entire counter to the Sunni-centric narrative of the Gulf states. What are your views?
Well, let me start by saying that Iran is a superpower in energy. As already pointed out, it has got probably 10% or more of oil and anywhere between 15 to 18% of gas. So it's a superpower in energy. And having been there long time ago, 76, 79, let me also tell you, with my personal experience, Iran is a great power in diplomacy. They know how to negotiate. And as of now, Iran is behaving like a regional great power, as we know, say in Syria. And post-sanctions, I agree that sanctions have not been fully lifted. I agree there is a shadow of Trump. Notwithstanding all that, I do not think that that agreement signed between Iran on the one hand and the P5 and others, the P5 plus 3, that cannot be reversed. So Iran has come back to the high table. And therefore, Iran's importance is only going to grow.
Mr. Taneja, sir, going back to Iran and its position in the region, and how India sees Iran as a stepping stone, not just into Iran, but into Afghanistan, into Central Asia, and the entire corridor that we are intending to build from Chabahar. I believe we've already committed a fair amount of investment, and in the long term, we're looking at a $20 billion investment in the SEZ in and around Chabahar. Your thoughts on that?
Well, there are two sides of the story when it comes to Iran. On the one hand, we are looking at Iran as a secure supplier of oil and gas, and helping Iran to build the infrastructure for that, including the Chabahar. We have also offered money to invest in petrochemical plant, in LNG terminal there, and also further investment in oil and gas exploration production. So that's lined up, is already conveyed, is roughly about 20 billion US. But we are also going beyond ready to go beyond $20 billion if opportunities are available. But the second part, which is equally important, is we also look at Iran as a place which offers us access to Central Asia. Very important part of it, so that we can build a corridor into Central Asia. At the same time, a corridor into Afghanistan from that side, because that would protect our interest and that would protect our assets in Afghanistan. So when you look at the response so far from Iran, has been fabulous. And the last 6 months, we have seen our shipping minister Nitin Gadkari ji going there. We, of course, foreign minister was there. Our petroleum natural gas minister was there. FICCI delegation has been there. We have practically every single important chairman, CEO of energy company from India has been to Iran the last 6 months. So we have done huge amount of homework for that, and Iran has responded accordingly.
Ambassador, I want a short answer from you. The criticism of New Delhi's handling of its relationship with Iran in the last 7 to 10 years has particularly been that New Delhi lacked the diplomatic capital, the will and the courage to orchestrate the creation of the space that Iran needed to engage with countries in the world, particularly New Delhi. But those who've supported New Delhi's stand have said that India was just being realistically vigilant. Where do you come in?
Well, let me take you back to 2003 when Khatami visited India as chief guest for the Republic Day, and we signed a strategic partnership with Iran. It didn't work out. Why? Because President Bush came in the way, because Iran was part of the axis of evil.
Right.
Now we have a chance, and that American shadow is gone. Now, coming to your question, to be fair to Iran and to India, I believe that our voting on the IAEA, that could have been avoided. We came under American pressure unnecessarily. But talking to Iranian diplomats, they have more or less forgotten it. They don't bring it up. So that is behind us. And but there is another problem. Don't forget that we still live in a financially unipolar world.
Right.
So if you want to trade with Iran or any other country, the international business, money transactions are controlled by the United States. So that problem is there, and we have to be realistic about it.
Right. Very interesting points. And we'll be back after a break to look at, as has been brought out, what more can India and Iran do together, particularly to enhance a strategic partnership which is crucial for India's role in West Asia in the coming years. Welcome back. We continue to have our two distinguished guests with us. Mr. Taneja, sir, one aspect that repeatedly figures in all of India's engagement with countries in Asia is the China factor. Now, here again with Iran, we have the shadow of China, because some say that many of our deals with Iran, particularly in energy, were renegotiated under Chinese pressure because perhaps the Chinese paid the Iranians a bit more. You have the Chabar port, which is coming up, and people regard it, especially the naval experts, regard it as a strategic counter to China's footprint with Gwadar, and China wanting to have monitoring stations and a huge naval presence there to counter India's activity. And equally importantly is the role that India wishes to play through Iran in Afghanistan and beyond, particularly as we have huge investments in Afghanistan and we see ourselves as a long-term player there. Now, what are your views around this?
Well, you see, China has very close ties with Iran, and Iran has got very close ties with China, and Iran is also looking for huge investment from China into infrastructure, energy, and the list just goes on. But at the same time, you know, Iran is very particular about one thing. They want Chinese interest, Chinese capital, but not beyond a point. Beyond a point. Now, Iranians are very uncomfortable with the rising presence of China in Pakistan, very close, like in Balochistan, the port, the economic corridor, and the energy corridor, where Chinese are going to invest roughly $36 billion in Pakistan. Iran is a little bit uncomfortable, probably as uncomfortable as India is with that kind of investment. $36 billion in an economy which is $250 dollar economy. So there are a lot of questions being raised in Tehran also. Questions may not be as intense as, for instance, in New Delhi, but I think there is a kind of India and Iran are beginning to be on the same page when it comes to Chinese investments in Pakistan. Now it depends on us whether we have the diplomatic, capability to swing that into our advantage. Number 2 point, which is very important at the same time, that when we look at Middle East or West Asia as we call it, is very different. That it's very important we look at that region in our own way. Iran has got its own view when it comes to the entire region, starting from Afghanistan to Morocco. We have got our own. So I think we sit down with the Iranians and trying to navigate our way in such a way that we can see where we actually our view and their view converge, so that we can work together in terms of building economic and energy interdependence between India and Iran, because the future is all about interdependence, with Iranian companies coming invest in India and Iran allowing us, our company, energy company, pharmaceutical companies, IT companies, university, to go there and invest in Iran.
Ambassador Fabian, interdependence was the theme Mr. Taneja was laboring on. Now, interdependence of India to the energy sources in the Arab world, Gulf countries, West Asian countries, again linked with what some people say is the sectarian paranoia that has now taken over the thinking in many of the Gulf countries. You've served in Qatar also as ambassador, and Mr. Modi's next stop is going to be Qatar, probably because before he goes off to Washington early in June. Qatar provides India 86% of its natural gas requirements. There are other countries that are keen to enter the India's energy requirements. Outside of China, we are the biggest. So I want your nuanced reply, which is a combination of this interdependence on how to keep everybody happy so that our energy pipelines keeps flowing, at the same time doing the balancing act in the world between the Shia-Sunni divide, because I'm told the Sunni world in the Gulf countries now see Iran as a bigger threat than even the Zionist threat that they've lived with over the last several decades. What's your view?
Well, I do not know whether this Sunni-Shia divide is not being exaggerated, because when you look at the GCC, we mentioned, of course, the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran. But don't forget that both Qatar and Oman do not toe the Saudi line. They do not want a confrontation with Iran for understandable reasons. Qatar shares a gas field, big gas field with Iran, and all along Qatar has been very very careful in its policy towards Iran. And Oman played a role in bringing out the nuclear agreement, as we know. So the Sunni is a little over-exaggerated, and diplomacy is not, implies the ability to dance with more than one partner at a time. So I have no doubt at all that Indian diplomacy will be able to have growing, excellent, deeper relations with both Iran as well as with Saudi Arabia in the years to come. That's not a difficult task for Indian diplomacy to take care of. And as regards Iran's own position, Mr. Taneja was mentioning about China, and I agree with him. Iran does not want to put all its eggs into a single basket.
Interesting.
They are an old civilization. They have seen so many things come and go. So I think there is a certain fit between what India wants and what Iran wants.
Interesting. Mr. Taneja, sir, the last question to you, that apart from Chabhar, India is also making and looking at making serious investments in the Farzad B oil fields in Iran. It's probably going to be the largest investment, at least in the immediate few months in the next coming year, by any outside element in the Iranian oil infrastructure. India is also looking at exploiting sooner than later the north-south transport corridor in Iran, which could strategically work as a counter to China's One Belt, One Road initiative in some way, at least in that part of the world, and the Indian infrastructure, as you have rightly brought out, in various other industrial platforms in Iran. So do you see, because it was predicted by some people at the time when Iran was emerging from the sanctions regime, that Iran's now going to play its cards in such a way that India has kind of missed the boat? Do you think that was a prediction too negative and too soon?
I think you look, both India and Iran now, in a way, my answer is yes and no. But at the same time, I think Iran has adopted one policy which has been officially communicated, is look east policy. So Iran is trying to tell both India and China and Japan to some extent, saying that look, let's try to come out with business solutions, energy solutions, political solutions, and other solutions, so that we can build this interdependence and it can be a win-win for both. Because Iran wants to reduce its dependence on Western companies, Western markets, and and Western knowledge to the extent it can. But at the same time, my view is that it depends a lot now more in India, because Iran has those ambitions. Iran wants to be the kind of regional hegemon. Iran wants to be the superpower of that region, and they want countries like India and China to basically, if possible, chip in and help them, assist them diplomatically, economically, and even otherwise. Now, we have our own way of looking at the Middle East, particularly when it comes to Saudi Arabia, and also there are other countries which we are interested in, such as Iraq and UAE. So So our views are different. But in my personal view, I think when with the Prime Minister's visit, we should be spending more time brainstorming, sitting down with Iranians and trying to find, let's say, looking at the chessboard and say, look, here we can chip in, here we can join hands, here we can build interdependence, here, sorry, you have to keep us out and all that. I think we have reached that stage, and I personally feel that in the coming few weeks and months and years, this is exactly where you're going to see India-Iran relationship moving in the context of India-Iran relationship, India-Middle East relationship, India-Afghanistan relationship, and India-Central Asia relationship.
Very interesting. Lots of points have been brought out, as always, on the show, and quite clearly, the jury is still out how much India can extract in its engagement with Iran, particularly when India continues to have a very, very strong ties with other energy-centric Gulf countries. Having said that, I think there are 2 or 3 points that could be takeaways for all of us. One is that Iran is already an energy superpower, and India's relations with Iran will remain exclusive of India's relations with other energy providing Arab and Gulf countries. Secondly, Iran, though having very strong links with China, will continue to wait and watch and deal with each other country such as India on a case-by-case basis. So you cannot expect Iran to go wholly towards one country's camp, but try and extract, as Iranian diplomacy has shown over the years, the best deal for itself. And most importantly, Iran remains strategically a huge option for India to exploit the opportunities that Iran, with its geographical location, provides to India, Indian businesses, and India's vision to move things forward beyond Iran into Afghanistan and Central Asia. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us on this show. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.